At 3,000 meters above sea level, plants are parched by the sun. Water is scarce. At lower altitudes, in the tropical humidity, tall trees reach up to the sky in search of light. Here on the southern tip of South Africa, wildlife has adapted to a wide range of climates, each with its own intensity. The sea is raging under a stormy sky. The rainy season has just begun. At the southern tip of the continent, from the Cape Peninsula to the Drakensberg cliffs to the KwaZulu-Natal mangroves, wildlife is getting ready to face another tropical depression. This may look like the land's end, because it is. The Cape of Good Hope at the tip of the peninsula is now a protected nature reserve, but still as untamed as ever. Wandering birds search for food along the shore. The first to come this morning are the pied-avocets, churning the wet sand with their narrow upturned bills, looking for small crustaceans and insects. The seagulls peck at the sand or wait. The pied-avocets digest their food standing, balancing on a single leg, or resting directly on the sand. Gulls and cormorants wait for the tide to go out before hunting on the tidal flats. Baboons try to make use of whatever the tide washes up, even if it's often only rubbish that's more likely to poison them or choke them rather than healthy food. What makes this all the more appalling is that it encourages them to scavenge through trash for food, bringing them close to urban areas. With their sharp teeth, including 3-centimeter-long upper canines, they can be defiant, even aggressive, which is why the population considers them pests. But on the coast, these baboons are protected, and they have no predators. They have all the time in the world, and don't hesitate to show the Egyptian geese who's in charge. The group is composed of some 40 individuals, of both sexes, under the control of a dominant male. Females care for their young, and sometimes other young baboons whose mothers have died or abandoned them. In the morning, the troop spreads out to find food. Baboons are omnivorous, but here their diet consists mainly of the innumerable species of plants that make up the rich flora of the Cape region. Baboons instinctively put into practice a form of sustainable management of their natural resources. Instead of stripping the first appetizing bush they see, they simply take a few leaves here and there. By gathering small amounts in this way, they spare the plants and diversify their diet. Succulent plants provide a large proportion of the fresh water they need. They really go after the succulents, so much so that their cheek pouches end up storing what they can't eat on the spot. In addition to succulents, the flora of the Cape region includes bulbous plants, heather, and proteus. All told, of the 9,000 species of plants found here, 70% are endemic, making the Cape region the richest spot on Earth in terms of plant density. The distinctive low shrub and heath vegetation of this region, called the fynbos, has such variety that it features 20% of all the plant species in Africa. The Cape Mountain zebra is also feasting on the grasses. Apart from a few antelopes, these zebras are the only large mammals on the peninsula, where they were reintroduced in 1984. The Cape Mountain zebra is a subspecies that was hunted to the brink of extinction in the middle of the 20th century, when only 100 remained in all of South Africa. It is immediately recognized for its elegant head and dense brown striping, which made it a favorite trophy for hunters. But today, these zebras live in peace and enjoy a fragrant, varied diet between the sea and the mountains. The Cape Peninsula may have a Mediterranean climate, but it is also subject to harsh weather. Because it is bounded to the east by the warm waters of the Indian Ocean and to the west on the Atlantic coast by the cold Benguela current, resulting in a constant wind. This makes the peninsula a perfect playground for the Cape gannets. The Cape gannet is powerful in flight, and when diving for fish, typically sardines and anchovies. Is there a moment's hesitation when the Cape gannet returns to the colony? It can't be all that easy to recognize your partner and your nest when there are thousands of birds around. To reconnoiter and find the right approach into the wind, they make several low-altitude approaches before landing. When flying together, they all move in the same direction to avoid collisions. After the greeting ritual, stretching their heads skywards, the Cape gannets take care of the nest. Now it's September, in the middle of the breeding season. The nest will be made of earth and seashells, held together with guano. This guano is an excellent fertilizer and was harvested here throughout the 20th century. Today, only the birds take an interest in the largest hunks of guano. With space so limited, there's lots of pilfering, leading to neighborly quarrels and some heated arguments. Here, they are fighting with interlocking beaks. Living in a close community does have its benefits. It makes the gannets less vulnerable to attacks by seals. It also provides an opportunity to meet a soulmate. Mating couples stay together for several years, even if the flames of passion may have to be rekindled, as in these courtship displays, when the gannets' necks and heads unite in a tender ritual. With their feet in the mud but ready for flight, the Cape gannets are hardly affected by sudden changes in the weather. Storm clouds approach, the temperature drops, and violent gusts of wind sweep through the fynbos. Facing the storm at the end of the world, a solitary ostrich continues to peck at the ground, leaning into the wind, determined to keep his plumage intact. This isn't his first storm, and he doesn't seem bothered by the gusting wind. Even when the clouds fade over the sea, the animals wait patiently. The bontebok simply chew their cud, while a patrol of sacred ibises defy the weather. The Atlantic Ocean shows its might, casting its spray and froth against the shore, as though trying to reclaim this spit of land that juts into the water. The night will bring only temporary relief. After a troubled night, it's a rough awakening for these African penguins, especially when they blow their horns. The African penguins nest on land, but their lives are entirely oriented to the sea. The first thing to do in the morning is to go to the water's edge to test the state of the ocean. At low tide, the sea is calm, and only a single young whale, probably strayed from its mother, breaks the surface of the waves. But the calm is short-lived because another storm is brewing. Like many animals, these penguins seem to fear the roar of the thunder and watch the sky with apprehension. This is when they usually go to the water. But is it prudent to go right now? In the end, they decide to stay put, sheltered in the rocks. Swimming can wait. When the danger is past, the penguins reevaluate the situation. One brave penguin is the first to venture forth, and others follow, with a cautious enthusiasm. They plunge into the water with obvious joy. Splashing around this way lets them clean their plumage and do their morning exercises. A few bold penguins lead the way, and others follow. At the least sign of danger, probably just a piece of seaweed they mistake for a sea lion, the penguins rush back to shore. Back on dry ground, they miss the water. But none of them dares to swim alone. Time for a conference. It looks like the leader doesn't want to go back into the water right away, so they continue their grooming session on the sand. When one begins, everyone else follows. Still, there's nothing better than a swim to loosen up. And this penguin would love to go back to the sea. It looks like he's getting ready to dive, hoping the others will join him. But no one follows his lead, and he makes a strategic retreat. He'll gather his companions and lead them to the main colony, located in the neighboring inlet, where he'll find more penguins ready for a swim. When everyone's ready, the troops start to advance. They soon join the rest of the colony. African penguins are extremely social birds, relying constantly on one another. The more the merrier, it seems. Unfortunately, the species is endangered. In the 20th century, the population fell from 1.5 million to just 200,000. The decline has continued, and there are only 50,000 African penguins today. Nonetheless, the species is well protected, and its nesting areas are preserved. But it is a victim to pollution of its habitat, primarily due to oil slicks and illegal discharging of waste at sea. It is also a victim to competition from commercial fisheries, which force the penguins to go ever further from shore to feed themselves and their young. Let's hope that the penguin's natural charisma and its positive impact on tourism will encourage efforts to protect it better. Soon the tide comes in, the clouds disperse, and the ocean appears in all its splendor. At the top of the cliff, a somewhat surprising creature has made its home. A small colony of rock hyrax has everything it needs: a commanding view, rock crevices for shelter from predators, and lots of sunshine that it needs for thermoregulation. The rock hyrax cautiously leaves its burrow for an open area, where it takes up its position for sentry duty. Some members of the group spend hours basking in the sun, while others feed. The cliff has a large variety of succulent plants, something for every taste, and water for rehydration. After the rains, puddles are a precious source of fresh water on these steep cliffs. These rock hyrax spend their days peacefully, without fearing the predators that threaten other hyraxes in drier areas. Here they have all the time in the world to build their social networks and confirm their position in the group's hierarchy. The rest of the time, they can appreciate the peace and calm, looking out over the vast blue ocean where whales sometimes break the surface of the waves. This is the season when southern right whales return to South African waters, some to mate, others to give birth. Mothers, the cow whales, accompany their young near the shore to protect their calves from the heavy swells of the open sea. From a whale's youngest days, barnacles attach themselves to the whale's head, much to the delight of the seabirds. The untamed coasts of southwestern Africa are home to a unique variety of wildlife. Whether in the ocean or on dry land, animals find their sustenance. And even if the coastal climate is stormy, what could be more comforting than a sunset over the ocean? But inland, there are rumors of a dragon roaming over the mountains. The Drakensberg, which means the Mountain of the Dragon in Afrikaans, is the highest and longest mountain range in southern Africa. Its hard rock walls dominating over erosion-scoured hills, the Drakensberg escarpment rises to over 3,000 meters above sea level. Sculpted by winds, eroded by rains, for 20 million years these steep slopes have resisted the attacks of the trade winds of the Indian Ocean. The soft rock scree at the foot of the cliffs is covered with grasslands, green in summer, yellow in winter. This is a remote area, and the rugged terrain keeps large animals away, so birdsong is the only sound in the cliffs. The scarce vegetation provides food for the small mammals and insects that can survive the severe variations in temperature. Numb with cold, reptiles have to leave their shelters to bask in the morning sun. This snake seems to be disturbed by the grasshopper, which happens not to be part of its standard diet. And in any event, it's still too cold to hunt for food. The cliffs offer their protection to animals that have successfully adapted to the environment. Baboons have acclimatized to many southern African biotopes, and here they live at 1,800 meters above sea level. For this tribe, each morning starts with a delousing session until the dominant male gives the signal to start gathering food. The younger baboons have their exercises to discover how to defy gravity. Except for the occasional bird of prey, baboons have no life-threatening predators. But that doesn't prevent the males from watching over their tribe. The rare shrubs offer only limited shade. But fortunately, today, in early spring, the new shoots provide a rare treat. From the ground, all you have to do is reach up to the branches and strip off the flowers. But the real gourmets prefer to climb the tree to make sure they leave nothing behind. Practice makes perfect, and the young baboons clamber over everything. But for travel, there's nothing better than hopping on to the back of an adult. Young baboons soon learn they have to work on improving their balance. At midday, under the hot sun, the sentries are beginning to show signs of fatigue. The tribe chooses to have its siesta in the shade, hardly troubled by the antics of the youngsters. Silence reigns on the slopes of the Drakensberg, in the heat, under a blue sky. Numerous canyons cut into these desolate high plateaus, and here, sheltered from storms, the trees of the Drakensberg have found a place to grow. The narrower the canyon, the greater the vegetation, sometimes enough to form a genuine forest, where runoff from rainfall on the peaks continues to flow, even in the dry season. Rivers running through the canyons maintain moisture in the air. This shady forest constitutes a very rich ecosystem in terms of both botany and bird life. The trees are so full of birds that the passerines vie to be heard with their song, some in the open, like this Guernsey's sugarbird. Other species, like the southern bulbul, the elegant African red-eyed bulbul, the greater blue-eared starling, and the speckled pigeon, are more discreet, hidden in the leaves. In early spring, flowers are blooming everywhere, and the air is filled with their exquisite nectar scent. With its short beak, the Cape white-eye has to feed on flowers from around the petals. The dark-capped bulbul chooses flowers that are easier to reach. But the all-around champion is the malachite sunbird, whose long, narrow beak isn't only used for singing. He alone can reach the heart of flowers without damaging the petals. Another virtuoso with his beak is the Cape weaver. The male Cape weaver ties leaves together to firmly anchor his nest. After applying the finishing touches, the male waits for a female to inspect his work. This female seems to be interested. It's a sure sign of successful courtship. All told, nearly 250 species of birds gather pollen from the flowers of the Drakensberg. Leaving the deep canyon, the river flows through a broader, less wooded valley. The passerines have to be careful in this open land. These scattered shrubs offer little protection from the sharp, steely gaze of the birds of prey. Fortunately for them, the master of this domain is a carrion bird with no interest in the passerines. The bearded vulture is content to scavenge for bones and then break them up by dropping them on the stone below. But barely after dropping one, other carrion birds approach. The white-necked ravens are physiologically unable to digest bones. They're after the marrow and tendons. The bearded vulture has no intention of being robbed. Spreading his wings to their full span of over 2.5 meters, he tries to shoo them away. But this jackal buzzard, waiting and hiding behind a rock, wasn't born yesterday. While generally preferring living prey, there's always room for a ready meal, especially in winter. Vultures fly mainly by floating in ascending currents and are far less agile than ravens. Outnumbered and disinclined to fight, the vulture tries to scare off the ravens by flying in broad circles above the cliff. But this carries him far away and leaves the others time enough to help themselves. But just after a mouthful, the vulture is back. Finally, the most persistent raven adopts the same strategy as the buzzard, taking advantage of the diversion caused by the other ravens to steal the vulture's meal. When evening falls, calm returns to the valleys of the Drakensberg. The cliffs gradually vanish in the fog and temperatures drop. The threatening clouds announce the tropical storms that will soon be brewing over the Dragon's Mountain. Further to the east, the sky is gray over the hills of KwaZulu-Natal. The rainy season is sure to come, but not just yet. Wildlife must simply wait. At the start of the southern spring, the only trees with green leaves are the ones that manage to sink roots into groundwater. For the time being, the riverbeds are dry and have only sand to offer. At 500 meters above sea level, the wind off the ocean brings a bit of humidity. The African buffalo graze on young shoots on the windward slopes. Despite weighing 800 kilograms, and despite the male's horns that form a continuous boss over their heads, buffalo are naturally cautious and are alerted by the least scent in the air, especially when it's the scent of a big cat. But this lioness is a bit too far from her sisters to hunt, and she's not in immediate danger. During the day, she'd rather rest while enjoying a good view of the surroundings. The buffalo know there's little risk so long as they stay together. In fact, it's the lioness who's better off staying in her tree for the time being. A family of impalas take comfort from the reassuring presence of the buffalo, but remains on alert. Given the circumstances, the big cat would prefer to continue her peaceful nap. Her only real problem is finding a comfortable position. The buffalo also rest during the heat of the day, the best time for chewing their cuds in the sun. Not far away, 4 young lions are also recuperating, One may have been butted by a buffalo, because one side of his head is severely bruised. Whoever said that life was easy for the king of the savanna? It's true that most of the time the males let the females do the hunting, especially because the females run faster. These young males are probably nomadic lions, in other words, lions kicked out of their birth pride by a dominant male, and now seeking a new territory where they can meet females. This means they must feed themselves, which is even harder because they lack experience. Tonight they will hunt, but for now they are resting in the sun. At the very worst, they'll be able to feed on carcasses stolen from weaker predators. Finally, in the heat of the day, the only creatures stirring are this couple of dung beetles. The male is pushing this food reserve to their burrow. It's a complicated task, but the dung beetle can move the equivalent of 1,000 times its body weight and has the energy to do the job. He also has to avoid falling into the hands of the baboons, who'd have no qualms about supplementing their diet with a few plump insects. Here the baboon is clinging to a tree trunk in order to dig out larvae hidden under the bark. Unlike other baboons on the Cape Peninsula or in the Drakensberg Mountains, the baboons living here enjoy everything the tall trees have to offer: food, a playground, a lookout place, and shelter. But baboons are cautious, and they realize they may not be the only ones looking for food in the branches. Sometimes it's important to bow out gracefully. These southern African bush elephants have an easier time finding food than the elephants in Namibia, but they don't have the vast marshlands of the Okavango Delta for bathing. They have to make do with dust baths, or mud baths, if the weather allows. Elephants aren't the only animals to appreciate the muddy marshes. Rhinos use them to remove their parasites and to cool down. So long as they're not pushed out. Even if the elephants haven't come to the pool yet, the rhinos are fully aware that it's time to take their leave. Elephants don't like sharing, especially not with them. For these two, it's not a problem, as they're already covered with mud. What distinguishes the southern white rhinoceros from the black rhino is its wide upper lip, which allows it to graze rather than feeding on leaves. White rhinos are solitary, territorial animals. Mating couples stay together only a fortnight. Whenever you see a pair of rhinos, they're often a mother and her child. Rhino cows protect their calf for 2 or 3 years, until they reach a respectable size and no longer have to fear the big cats. This young rhino is an only child, and shy. He's a little surprised to meet a slightly older rhino, and soon runs back to his mother. When curiosity finally gets the best of him, he wanders back to check out the scene. But ultimately, he's still a little young to socialize. The southern white rhinoceroses of South Africa all share pretty much the same genetic makeup, because all are descendants of the last 20 individuals that were still alive at the end of the 19th century. Fortunately, despite poaching, the species has been protected in nature reserves and is a little less endangered today. As their population has increased in the reserves, clashes between males are more frequent. They engage in jousts, but seldom with any real violence. Logically enough, the smaller male with the shorter horn admits defeat. To discourage poachers, biologists in some reserves decide to saw off the rhino's horns themselves. This doesn't prevent elephants from recognizing their ancestral enemy, even if this rhino is not a threat. But while elephants tolerate lots of animals around them, including even lions, they seem to have a genuine aversion to rhinos. When young male elephants are in rut, they can be aggressive to the point of killing rhinos that happen to be drinking at the same waterhole. These behemoths need large spaces to roam, and the fact that they have to live confined in reserves unfortunately means forced cohabitation with other species. Yet, fortunately, there will soon be water enough everywhere when the rainy season begins. Already, the vultures seem resigned to the storm. On the other hand, the African harrier hawk and the trumpeter hornbill appear to fear the storms, which can be extremely fierce in these tropical regions. For a few hours, nature looks frightening. The animals hunker down in silence. Now it's time for the earth to drink. Within a matter of days, the rivers are replenished and water flows again. This is the start of a time of abundance when the Nyalas seem to frolic with joy. While these beautiful antelopes drink, the river flows eastward to the Indian Ocean. Approaching the coast, it runs through the only remaining tropical forests in KwaZulu-Natal. These preserved parcels of forest are sadly the only vestiges of primary forests that were ravaged by human expansion and the spread of agriculture. It's at the very top of these tall trees, in the canopy, that flowers and fruit grow, attracting the many birds that come to warm themselves in the morning sun, like these white-eared barbets. The purple-crested turaco is looking for the fruits that make up its entire diet. Below, the lilac-breasted roller is waiting for the heat to bring out insects and hoping to get them before the little bee-eater. And this bird is just hungry for recognition. The dark-capped bulbul wants to be heard in this avian symphony. The forest is alive with birdsong, but barely a few kilometers away, what we hear is the deep roar of the sea as the trade winds drive the litany of waves. At the border with Mozambique, sandy beaches stretch to the end of sight. The Indian Ocean brushes against the dunes, and during the highest tides, rushes into the land. This explains the formation of brackish water lagoons, where the water is more still and mangroves were able to develop. This ecological paradise receives fresh water from frequent tropical showers, as well as a number of rivers that empty into the lagoons. Half hidden in the luxurious vegetation, a Nile crocodile stretches its 4 meters of scales in the sun. But this isn't the only formidable creature hiding on the riverbank. At night, the hippos spread across the banks to feed. Sometimes they'll still be on land when the sun rises. That's when they can be a danger to humans. You'd better get out of the way when they return to the water. The dominant male is guarding his harem and watches carefully over the territory. After making sure all his females are together, he can join them. While the young hippos are playful, all that the adults want to do is rub together, resting their heads on one another. This allows them to nap while keeping their nostrils above water. The estuaries also attract birds that eat fish, larvae, and mollusks. The gray heron, the pink-backed pelican, the African spoonbill, and the yellow-billed stork have no qualms about feeding next to the crocodiles. The dunes afford the inland areas some protection from the sea spray, but the trade winds are so strong at times that even the lagoons are swept by violent gusts. The weather can change dramatically. For the antelopes living here, like these waterbucks and nyalas, the rainy season doesn't bring the same relief as for those living in arid regions in the north of the country. As tropical showers are hardly pleasant, the best way of dealing with them is to ruminate in peace until the worst is over. The rhinos also wait for the storm to blow over. The only creature that continues its activity despite the weather is used to living in the wetlands. The woolly-necked stork takes advantage of the opportunity to hunt for frogs and small reptiles. But when its plumage is too wet, even this stork gives up, just like the crested barbet, which knows it won't find any insects under these conditions. Riverbank birds with waterproof plumage, like this pair of pied kingfishers or this snowy egret, are hardly bothered by mild rains. In wooded areas, mammals take shelter under the leaves. The vervet monkeys, usually so energetic, are forced to wait for the shower to end. They keep looking up at the sky, as if to implore for the sun to return. Fortunately, some trees have enough to keep them busy. As soon as the rain stops, the most impatient ones go back to the ground, but they're soon disappointed by the mud below. Mangrove crabs have nothing to fear from mud or storms. These scuttling crabs play an important role in this ecosystem. Their larvae are food for small fish. The tunnels they dig oxygenate the ground, and their feces helps to fertilize it. Even if they grow in water, these plants also benefit from the rain, which lowers the salinity of the wetlands. Now the flowers are only waiting for the sunshine to open up. And with the first rays of the sun, the sounds of nature fill the air again. The entire lagoon springs to life. This young South African giraffe has a great future ahead, provided he gets the nutrients he needs to grow quickly. To fortify his huge skeleton, a giraffe calf has to absorb at least 20 grams of calcium every day. This sedimentary soil provides the minerals he needs, even if it's not terribly pleasant to gather or to swallow. But instinct drives him on. The young male giraffe will soon reach his adult height of 5 meters. Then he too will cross the plains with his elegant loping stride. Giraffes live in groups and prefer to roam through open areas. This makes it easier for them to spot lions, if any dared to attack them, and also to observe one another. Each mother keeps watch over her young. They only bear one calf at a time, while the males keep an eye on the females they could mate with. At frequent intervals, the dominant male sniffs the female to identify when she comes into estrus. He curls up his lips as a signal to keep other males at bay. When they live in a nature reserve, as is often the case in southern Africa, giraffes lead a peaceful life. Here their population is stable, whereas across Africa as a whole, the number of giraffes has fallen by 40% over the past 30 years. Soon, will zebras be the only animals grazing on the savanna? When the sun sets over the lagoon, the amphibians waken. The antelope seems to appreciate the peaceful end of the day. The setting sun brings a reminder that every day could be the last day. Tomorrow, they will have to survive another day, finding food, finding water, finding companions and a mate, getting rid of parasites, escaping from predators, and so on. At the end of the day, that's not an impossible task for wildlife, as they're used to making do with the generosity and whims of nature. Animals rely on instinct, experience, and possibly also a bit of luck. When evening comes, these creatures need to rest, to appreciate the habitat with which they're so intimately involved. Each park and animal reserve is a haven of peace, preserved from the turmoil of the world. A universe where each ecosystem contributes to the richness of nature and where wildlife deserves to preserve its place. In exchange for this, even the most powerful creatures demand nothing in return. Nothing except respect for their tranquility, their right to keep living on a planet now confiscated by humankind.